Hey there everyone, today I have a review that actually means an awful lot to me, and it's of a band that is very close to my heart in a lot of ways. Today I'm going to review Gallows' latest release and self-titled release, Gallows. Now to begin with, Gallows formed in 2005 and wasted no time whatsoever by writing their debut album straight off the bat and releasing it in 2006. The record and the live shows gathered a lot of media attention, and this album was seen as a real kick in the teeth to a lot of the bands that were big at the time, because it was an incredibly raw, unpolished, almost throwbacky kind of punk record, but it still had a very modern sound about it and was certainly unique in a sense. This punk record, along with the band's super intense live show and really energetic frontman Frank Carr, they managed to gain a lot of press between these two things. Also, to this day, I feel like this record ignited their career, really reignited the hardcore punk scene, especially in London. There have been a ton of great hardcore bands coming out recently and since the release of this record. This meant that the band's next release in 2009, Great Britain, had a lot of eyes upon it. This is where I really first heard of Gallows, and honestly my first impression of them was not great at all. I really didn't like Frank's vocals. I thought they weren't that great, and the music was a bit too raw for my ears at the time. I was listening to very cleanly produced music like Bullet for My Valentine, Killswitch Engage. It's kind of weird to think that was just 3 years ago, but whatever. Anyway, I eventually picked up a copy of this album, and with every listen I enjoyed it a little bit more, and I was really starting to grasp and understand the sentiment behind the band and behind hardcore and punk in general. This band was very much my personal introduction to hardcore punk and punk rock. I grew to love Frank's really unrefined vocals, and I now consider it to be one of the best records ever released. To show that, I actually have this record on vinyl as well. Get that in the camera shot, there you go. I'll quickly get the record out to show you because I love the pressing of this too. As you can see, I managed to pick up one of the splatter pressings of this vinyl. Something like only 1,000 were pressed. I'm not too sure what the exact number is, but there you go. But anyway, like I said, I really feel that this is one of the best records ever written, and that's a massive difference between not liking it at first, you know? I just felt like it was a bunch of fantastic, well-written, emotive hardcore punk songs that really showcased a lot of musicianship. It also had a very dark sound that kind of captured the tension in Britain at the time that me personally growing up here could see. It was a super relatable record that really hit home. Songs like Queensbury Rules, Crucifix, London Is the Reason, stuff like that just hit home really hard. I also saw Gallows live for the first time in June of 2010 at the Free Rage Against the Machine gig in Finsbury Park, and they just blew me away. I also went to the Great Britain show in December that year, and to this day it's one of the best shows I've been to, and it's also very much a defining moment in my life. But anyway, you get the point. I love Gallows, although I didn't say it that much. I still think Orchestra of Wolves is a great record too. But anyway, I attended Sonosphere 2011, and one of the biggest reasons I went was because Gallows were playing the second stage. I was super excited to see him again. What I did not expect was Frank's shocking announcement that he was going to leave Gallows. This was a real shock to the system because I had seen them a ton and it felt like he was very much the face of Gallows, and I couldn't really imagine them without him. And after that festival they announced a final show in London with Frank. I attended this show, and again it was a celebration of everything that everyone loves in Gallows. There was Frank's whole family there. He even picked out a couple of members in the audience that he recognised from over the years, you know, from attending Gallows shows. It was very emotional and very much a celebration. Even people like Eva Spence of Rolo Tomasi came on stage to sing a song. So that was that. All we had left was to wait and hear who Frank's replacement would be. There were rumours flying around about it possibly being Richie of Black Hole, and also now in Sharks, which is another Carter brother. It made a lot of sense at the time. However, it turned out to be someone completely different. The announcement was that it was the guitarist and backing singer for the band Alexis on Fire. Now, looking back, it seems kind of silly, but I really at the time just could not picture it, and I found it so odd. To me, in that very instant, Gallows were dead, which was a very rash decision. I kind of regret thinking that, and I feel kind of stupid now, but at the time, it was just soul-crushing. The next EP that dropped, Death is Birth, sounded so flat and rushed I couldn't really enjoy it, and it just fueled my opinion that Gallows weren't very good anymore. Having said that, I did like the song True Colours, especially when it first came out. However, on the EP, they remastered it and it lost a lot of its raw, aggressive impact. However, since then, I've seen the band with Wade on a live front, like I said in my live review, many a time, and it really did restore my faith in the band and I just ate my words about Gallows and Wade. This was a big thing to me as well because Gallows on a live front were always a great band, one of the best, and it was a really big thing to me. So seeing them be great with Wade really restored my faith. So as you can see, this record is the follow-up to one of my favourite records out ever written, my introduction to hardcore punk, and it's also the follow-up to kind of this legacy that Gallows laid down with Frank. Now, I actually attended the album release party in Kingston and picked up a physical copy of this album. So this is one of the first of my reviews. You can see my notes in the computer screen there. In the reflection. But anyway, onto the record. The album kicks open with the song Victim Culture. It has a very intense introduction. You have some toms in the background, like ever so slightly eerie sounds underneath, a woman sort of going on about illness, paranoia, and all these types of themes. The band then just kick in, and Wade screams one of the most memorable moments of the entire album. He says the words, "In us we trust," and I personally think it's very much a sentiment to all the doubters and all the naysayers. But regardless, it was one hell of an intro, really kicked straight into what Gallows were all about, and ultimately this song is just a phenomenal punk rock, hardcore punk, call it what you like, but it's just a great song with some killer riffs, great gang vocals, great guitar work, and what I was really glad about was the fact that it still sounded like Gallows. The next track, Everybody Loves You When You're Dead, opens nicely with a building drum roll and guitar riff. Once it kicks in, it sounds kind of like classic Orchestra of Wolves era Gallows, especially in the guitar work. It's a really well written track, and I especially love the ending. It just builds with Wade screaming, asking for certain icons to come back, such as Sid Vicious and Joey Strummer. And instead of kicking in again, it just cuts out and you just hear Wade scream the line, "We need you now," from a distance. And again, it's just a great sentiment and a great ending to the song. The next track, Last June, I'd imagine most of you would have heard at this point, as it was the lead single from the album. It opens with a great bass guitar riff and some drums to back it. Once it kicks in, again it just sounds like a very good punk rock / hardcore punk song. It's perhaps a touch repetitive, which is something I picked up on this entire album, but it's just so high octane, so leery and aggressive that it really doesn't matter, and the guitars also add very subtle layers and textures in there and mix it up just enough for it to not come across as repetitive, despite the fact that it actually kind of is. Also, it's got a great chorus that really sticks. I feel like a lot of this album has a lot of those things that were in Last June. It's just 32 minutes or whatever of just brilliantly written punk rock, hardcore punk songs that just sound great. They've got massive choruses, which is a first for Gallows, but it's still very much in a raw, aggressive sense. It doesn't feel too singy-songy or over the top. There's some phenomenal guitar work, some great solos, tight musicianship, but not so tight that it doesn't feel raw. It still feels very live and in the moment. But anyway, the track after Last June, Outsider, is one that really caught my attention. It was another single from the album, and at first I didn't like it, but it really grew on me, and I'm just going to describe it now. The song opens with a build, and there's this great guitar riff that comes in, and Wade lays down some of the best lyrics on the album. They're delivered in this almost spoken word way by Wade, and he really builds it well with each line getting more and more aggressive, and the drums behind it building, his guitars add an effect too. His voice just gets more and more visceral as it goes on, and eventually it just kicks in and there's this huge sing-songy type vocals behind it, and like I said, it just sounds huge. There's some great back-in vocal chants, and then it kicks into a sort of classic Gallows-esque breakdown, using the very sort of, the only way I can really describe it is jangly, if that's even a word, but it uses that jangly sort of guitar tone that was on Orchestra of Wolves to full effect. There's a slightly smaller build after this, and it kicks in again. For some reason, I get a very Velotok vibe from this song, just because it's so focused on this chord progression for the majority of the song. They sort of build around it with great guitar work, especially towards the end. The next track, Vapid Adolescent Blues, opens with one of the faster moments on the track. The guitar has a very kind of weird sound to it. It ever so slightly reminds me of Touche Amore's tone. But, having said that, it's just a lot more aggressive. The vocals fit in with it really well. There's some backing vocals too. Subtle guitar work in the mix, mixing it up. And ultimately, like I said, like a lot of the songs on this album, it's just a very aggressive, fast-paced, high-octane, blood-pumping song. It's brilliantly written. And now at this point, I don't really know what else there is I can pick out, because for what it is, it's a brilliant record. It's a very focused, cohesive, punk rock record that has influence from all over the spectrum in terms of hardcore. For example, Cult of Mary opens with a very post-hardcore riff, and it really reminds me of Touche Amore and Let Live, but with more aggression. In this song there is another great chorus, like I've said, it's super memorable. The ending of this track is probably my favourite ending on the whole record. Wade just sounds so aggressive and almost ever so slightly desperate in this last moment of the song, and it just sounds brilliant. Another song I want to talk about is the song Odessa. This song is kind of a bizarre one. The main focus on the intro is on Wade, and it has these drum hits back in his voice with this sort of spaced out guitar playing every now and again. And then once it kicks in, it's got this really weird groove to it that just feels really dancey, but still maintains a very punk rock energy and feel about it. Again, it's masterfully catchy and just a really fantastically written song. Massive chants, and in the last minute there is a very post-hardcore-esque build that just sounds great. The drummer really uses his cymbals well, and Wade really emphasises this build as well. It goes out in one last chorus and it just sounds freaking huge. I could go on and describe more of these songs, but ultimately you're getting fairly similar songs with some variation that's nice. It doesn't feel like a repetitive album, it doesn't feel like there's any one song that's just being copied and pasted, it's mixed, but I think I've touched down on all the main points. In summary, it's just 32 minutes of great punk tunes that celebrate everything that's great about punk and many of its subgenres. I feel like Wade does a great job of fitting in with the band, and I don't feel like he's replacing Frank. I feel like he's kind of crafted his own little niche that Gallows fans will appreciate without getting too many flashbacks to Frank. Having said that, there are a lot of comparisons you could make in the music. But regardless, the band have come back and made everyone eat their words. I will say, as far as negatives go, I feel like Wade is slightly less distinctive vocally than Frank, but honestly, he's a better vocalist in a traditional sense. For me anyway, I like vocals to sound honest, raw and unperfected in punk, which is why I loved Frank. And it's something that almost no one could really top. He just felt so London, and as weird as that sounds, and just so honest and raw, like I said, in his vocals. But I do also feel like Wade traditionally is a better vocalist. He has more visceral screams and they're just more practiced. So it all goes down to personal preference there. So I can't really pick on them too much for that. However, one gripe I do have that is fairly large, not massive, but fairly large, like I said, is some of Wade's lyrics are just way too cheesy for me. Some of the lines he throws down are just a little bit like, really? But no worries, it didn't distract from the music, and he still sounded angry while he said it, and for me, vocal delivery is a lot more than lyrics, so that's fine. It feels like their songwriting is as good as it's ever been, the band sound tight as ever, and the production and recording style ensure it still feels jammed out and live, like I said, but it ends up just sounding like a soundtrack to a really leery, ready-to-go bar fight, and it's just a brilliant punk rock album. I will quickly make the inevitable comparison to Great Britain. Like I said, Great Britain is one of my favourite albums of all time. The orchestral moments, the very theatrical sense it has, and the way it captures such an important moment in Britain just means an awful lot to me. So this album isn't quite that good, but regardless, like I said, it's a phenomenal record, and I feel it's deserving very much of around an 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys and gals later.